What do you think about the EU and the US sending billions of taxpayer money to Ukraine when so many people in Europe and America are starving or in massive debt? It is absolutely insane. It's insane to see, and it's one of the best examples in the modern day, or it is the best example today in the West of the interconnection between imperialism and the struggle of the working class, the class struggle. Because all of this money and all of this, what we would call surplus, all of this societal surplus created by the labor of American workers, is being, or workers in Europe or Canadian workers, is being funneled into Ukraine. And it's being used to give, arms and weapons and logistics to mostly right-wing pro-US forces, including a lot of, neo-Nazi extremist nationalist elements who the US has propped up since at least 2014. So at the same time that's going on, you have this crisis of inflation, right? You have a cost of living crisis in the US. Rent is constantly going up. Utility costs are skyrocketing. Personally, my utility bill was like $100 more last month than what it has been. It went up and then went up again. And, I looked it up, and that's for everyone. The cost of healthcare is going up even higher, as if that's even possible, while over 60% of Americans experience healthcare debt at some point in their lives. And in the UK, a place where they have public healthcare, the NHS is being dismantled, right? They're constantly dismantling public funding towards healthcare so that they can send it to Ukraine, and put arms in the hands of neo-Nazis. So it shows that imperialism is truly the highest stage of capitalism. And there is no anti-imperialism without anti-capitalism, and there's no anti-capitalism without imperialism. They are one and the same. Imperialism is not an action, right? Imperialism, it is the U.S. sending guns to Ukraine, but that's not all it is, right? It's the global system that currently exists, which is dominated by shareholders on Wall Street and London, Western finance capitalists, big banks, and industrial capitalists in the U.S., who for years have made profits by super exploiting the global South. And because capitalism is a system that forces you to constantly expand and grow, otherwise you'll go under due to market competition, the capitalists in the West, the finance capitalists, have become dependent on super exploiting those countries. They need to continue super exploiting those countries and finding new ways to make profit or exploit those workers harder. Otherwise, they're not going to fulfill, what capitalism forces them to fulfill, or the what's the word I'm thinking of? I don't know. They're not going to continue to grow and expand their capital the way that capitalism necessitates, and they're going to go under. So they're insistent. They must, under threat of being destroyed, continue the U.S. dominated, U.S. hegemonic global, U.S. Western finance capital dominated global system. And they must continue and perpetuate the super exploitation of the global South. So you see, they're willing to basically push us to the brink of nuclear war in order to do that. And not only that, but push us to the brink of nuclear war using all our tax dollars at a time when the working people at home are suffering harder than they have been in years. So with that, since I just said that, we'll go to the first video we have for today. I was going to react to a different video, but we'll start with this one. This is something that I just saw on my YouTube today from Bloomberg Markets and Finance, obviously a bourgeois media outlet, obviously pro-capitalist, pro-imperialist, blah, blah, blah. And they're covering Davos. All right, for those who don't know, Davos is this ski resort. It literally sounds like it's out of a movie. It's this ski resort where really rich and powerful people from the public and private sector go to hang out and eat nice dinners and talk about public policy, determine important questions for making political policy, because we know, of course, the capitalists are the ones who determine our politics in capitalist society. So this is one of the major places where they do that. It's not the only place, right? Like right-wingers, some of them think that the the rich
kind of new phase.
The rich or the bankers or whatever meet in Davos once per year, and that's where they determine all the policy. It's not true. Lobbyists still have a major role. There's still day-to-day policy decisions that happen within global political systems, but this is a major place where the public and private sector comes together and meets. Where government officials can meet with private sector, with capitalists, with bankers, and determine what they want to do. So this is from Bloomberg's coverage of Davos, and it says the red line must be not engaging in world war, says Germany's Habeck, who is the vice chancellor, Robert Habeck. I'm sure I'm saying that name wrong, even though I'm like 20% German. But watch this. It's quite interesting. Tell me how the sound is in the chat, please.
What kind of new phase does that mean for Germany? Is there going to be more support for Ukraine, you think?
Well, we have given more and more support. So you see there's a dynamic from the German starting point before the war that we won't deliver weapons in zones of conflicts. We are now delivering all sorts of weapons. Actually, not all sorts of weapons. The heavy tanks we don't. But we always said that we will adjust our decisions in the line of the argument of our partners. This is mainly the US, but also the other partners. And you see Great Britain, Finland, Poland, they are willing now to bring tanks to Ukraine. First question is Germany, there German tanks, or Great Britain not, but the Finnish and the Polish tanks, German tanks, we have to say yes to that. I argue that we will do that.
Yeah.
And
this is for the Leopard battle tanks. Would you be in support in sending those?
Well, we haven't made a decision. Do this in line with the alliance. So if America would decide that they will bring battle tanks to Ukraine, that will make it easier for Germany. You know our history, and we are a little bit more reluctant there for understandable reasons. But
why reluctant? I mean, the reluctance also
because of our history bringing tanks and tanks fighting against Russia. But this is not my perspective. I think we adjusted our position many times over the last year, as every country has done, and Ukraine has proven that they are careful.
Absolutely untrue. There have been many reports, including even from mainstream outlets or human rights watch organizations like Amnesty International, who usually goes along with the U.S. State Department, who say there is, no organization or no oversight when it comes to where these weapons are going, where these weapons that the West and that NATO sends to Ukraine end up. And a lot of them are ending up in the hands of ethno-nationalists, ending up in the hands of neo-Nazis, ending up in the hands of extremists, anybody who's willing to fight the Russians. So there's that. He's lying about that and saying that Ukraine is being, super careful. Just a few years ago, before, the Western media all hopped on the bandwagon of proxy war with Russia via Ukraine, they were calling Ukraine the most corrupt nation on earth. Right? They were saying this is an incredibly corrupt nation where, right-wing extremist Nazi militias have a ton of power, and where corporations, including multinational corporations, have a lot of power. NGOs, non-governmental organizations backed by the U.S. State Department, have a lot of control in Ukraine. But now that we're sending them endless weapons, we're just like, oh, they're not corrupt anymore. I'm sure they're putting these weapons in good hands, when all of the evidence on the ground is the exact opposite, right? He just wants to continue going along with NATO's broader strategy of waging a proxy war against Russia by, using the Ukrainian people as cannon fodder, essentially, which is sad. It's basically NATO forcing the Ukrainian people to their death at gunpoint, go fight Russia for us or else. And the other thing that he says is that many people in Germany are resistant to do this because of our history. Because of our history with fighting Russia. He kind of just brushes over that. He's talking about the Nazi history when the Soviet Union defeated the Nazis, taking 80% of the total casualties in World War II. So, yeah, a lot of people are skeptical about offensively engaging with Russia, engaging directly with Russia. because of how that's, looked at now historically by the rest of the world and how that went for Germany. Obviously horrible. So people are skeptical of that. And he's like, oh, that's not my view, though. We just need to keep sending money and weapons to them because the Ukrainians have proven trustworthy when, like we said, no, they haven't. No, they haven't. So, of course, people in your country are skeptical of this, you imperialist NATO simp. Of course, the working people are. I mean, you're part of the bourgeois class. You're part of the ruling class, which is why you're in Davos right now. But, of course, the working people in your country who can't afford to heat their homes right now, who can't afford regular costs of living, regular necessities of living, despite working full time because you're taking all their money and sending it to neo-Nazis in Ukraine. Of course, people are skeptical about this, and it is because of your history, but that's not the only reason, right? It's because people want their governments in the West to finally start taking care of them. But no, you all only care about your broader imperialist strategy of waging a proxy war against Russia and China, a new Cold War, so to speak.
On the battlefield, but successful. They need more weapons, and Putin is not seeing that he's making a big mistake. He's offering his population now, the men he's sending to the front, they are doomed to die, a lot of them, but still the war is ongoing and Ukraine needs more support, and this will be one of the first decisions the new Minister of Defense has to take.
Is there, Minister, a red line? I mean, we're also talking about possibly sending fighter jets. At some point, does this get taken as a declaration of war from Putin? Does he interpret it as actually we're now full on war?
Well, the red line must be always that we are not engaged in a third world war, that the war increases that much, that the US, that Europe, that Germany will be will be part of the conflict, meaning that we can't stop it anymore. So it must stay at the front, at the battlefield, Ukraine. But saying that means also that Ukraine must succeed. They have to win the war, and we have to give them all the military equipment that is needed to win the war. And now we are discussing the tank question.
Here's why this is so ridiculous. When they talk about a red line that Russia must not cross, otherwise we could be looking at World War III. Do you know what Russia said the red line was for years and years and years and years? They said it is a red line if NATO starts training troops or putting troops in Ukraine, or if Ukraine were to officially join NATO. So the US Ukraine didn't officially join NATO, although the idea was floated over and over and over again, despite Russia saying that it's a red line. But the US started training troops, thousands of troops, right on Russia's border in Ukraine, right along the border, which Russia for years said this is a red line, this is a red line, this is a red line. But the US and the West continued to escalate their rhetoric towards Russia. They continued to give support to groups who were massacring people in the Donbass region in eastern Ukraine near the Russian border. And then the US starts arming and training all these NATO troops, which makes those troops NATO interoperable. So it makes those battalions in Ukraine interoperable with the NATO battalions in Germany and the NATO battalions in France and the NATO battalions in the Balkans, which has had more NATO troops occupying it than any other country on earth since the US carpet bombing of Serbia and Yugoslavia. So Russia was saying forever this is a red line, and if you do this, we're going to do a military operation. We're going to do something about it. If you put NATO troops in Ukraine, we are going to act. But they didn't care. NATO didn't care. They continued to carry out their imperialist project. The US overthrew Ukraine's government in 2014, and then they used that political foothold that they had gained to start training NATO troops in the region. Exactly what Russia said is a red line. And now we're in this horrific war, this horrific conflict. And we have NATO governments at Davos talking about how Russia's crossing a red line, or how Russia might cross a red line that puts us close to World War III. Like, y'all are the ones who put us here, right? Russia gave a red line in 2014. And it was a very simple red line. Stay away from us. Don't put your freaking troops at our border because we don't trust you. and they were right to not trust you because you started training thousands of troops at their border, and now we're here. Months into this disastrous conflict where thousands and thousands of people are dead. So it's pretty funny that Bloomberg and the people at Davos want to talk about a red line that Russia can't cross. Like, clearly that doesn't mean much to you guys. You completely ignored Russia's red line that would have allowed total peace in the region. Well, other than for the people of the Donbass. But that the Donbass war started because of U.S. meddling and interventionism anyways. So somebody said earlier, and I started, it says, I don't get how people can deny we live in a dictatorship of the bourgeoisie with events like this, meaning the Davos and the World Economic Forum meetings. And yeah, CBS News got lambasted the other day. They got just destroyed by people online for putting out this article like that they actually ended up changing the title of. It was so bad that CBS News ended up changing the title. So now it says, as elites gather in Davos, conspiracy theories gain traction online. And I can't remember exactly what the title was before, but it was something like, as elites gather in Davos, bizarre conspiracies that the rich run the world gain traction online. That was the previous name of the article. And then the whole article is about how, they do determine some stuff at Davos. The public and private sector does meet, but they're not determining policy that's that serious. It's not like they run the world. Like, well, they kind of do. Not even just kind of. They do run the world. They make all the important decisions. They're the ones who are consistently deciding to send weapons to Nazis in Ukraine when people are suffering a cost of living crisis at home. Right? That's not something the working people of the world would pick. That's something only the finance capitalists would want. But they're calling that a conspiracy. That's a conspiracy theory now, to say that rich people run the world under capitalism. So they will call anything that they don't like a conspiracy theory. I am going to pull up a video I did about this because I actually have a screenshot of this CBS article before
as the
they
super rich gather.
So y'all can see what the actual article title was.
In Davos, online conspiracy theorists make the bizarre claim that the world is run by the super rich. That's because it is. Only under late-stage neoliberal capitalism could an article like this be considered.
So you see that? Here's the article title now. Here's the previous article title. As the super rich gather in Davos, online conspiracy theorists make the bizarre claim that the world is run by the super rich. If the world's not run by the super rich, CBS, what are they doing in Davos? Why do the public and private sector have to meet to determine policy? Why can't the working people go to Davos and talk to their governments? Why can't we speak to our governments directly? Why do lobbyists and corporations have 24/7 access to our politicians, but we only get to vote for them once every few years? And even when we do, 93% of U.S. elections are decided by the candidate who raises the most money. And obviously the media and all the sources of information are owned by those same corporations and lobbyists. Why is it bizarre to say they run the world? It's not a conspiracy theory. David_C137 isn't a conspiracy theorist for saying this. Y'all are conspiracy theorists for saying it's not. Just kidding. They're just bourgeois ideologues.